I'm Janet.
And I am Roger.
Welcome to the season 6 of the Halfling and the Spaceman Journeys in Active Fandom. We love talking to creators about their journeys. Everyone has a story, but we're here to bring those stories to you and hopefully entertain and inspire you. And today we are happy to be talking with Dennis M. Myers. He is the writer of Rise of the Automated Empire series and works on other science fiction and fantasy novels. And recently, he's become a t shirt designer.
Woohoo.
Welcome, Dennis.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, how goes it?
Well, slowly. um, I've had a little bit too much time on my hands, so I have been writing more books. I've got 3 more manuscripts ready to go.
Oh,
So
good.
progressing.
Busy. So, that's what happens when writers have time, huh? They write. Go figure.
Mhm.
Go figure. Well, Dennis, I have to say, in various things that I've read when trying to do a little background on you, is one constant that you have is that you love your life, which is a wonderful thing to say. It always makes me happy to hear when other people are happy. And so tell us a little bit about your your life, your background. Tell us a little bit about Dennis.
Well, history wise, I spent 10 years in the United States Navy on submarines. And then after that, various things until I ended up being a software developer. And that was a very nice career. Um, Along the way, I got married, had a couple of kids, got a divorce, the usual. And then my second wife is May, and she's from Thailand, and she is one of the kindest, most caring, and generous people I have ever met. And I am so thrilled to be married to her. Knock on wood. She might get tired of me any day now. Um, I have 2 kids. My son lives here in Richmond, nearby.
Mm-hmm.
He is an electrician, and my daughter lives up in Pennsylvania with her husband and 2 kids. So I'm a grandfather a couple of times over,
Oh,
and
nice.
that also makes me very happy.
I'm sure. I'm sure. That's one of the cool things about being a grandparent is that you get to do all of the doting and all of the spoiling, and then you get to give the kids back to the parents.
Yes.
You have a little bit of that, maybe.
Although because we had twins, I
Mm-hmm.
know I have the skills to change diapers rapidly. My
Mm.
daughter has not asked me to change a diaper yet.
Uh-huh.
But you're prepared nonetheless.
I'm prepared if I need to, absolutely. But
uh
hubby seems to be quite adept at it himself.
huh. Well, that's good. That's good. All right, well, spaceman.
Well, Dennis, one of the things we ask people is, especially creators of people who write sci fi, when you were coming along, were you a nerd?
Funny story. In the high school that I grew up in, there were basically 3 major factions. There were the jocks, who were the sports people and all of that. There were the nerds, who did the computer stuff and that kind of thing. And then there were the burnouts. They were the ones who, they had the best pot and that kind of thing. I hung out during the day with the nerds. In fact, I was president of the computer club.
Oh.
Hmm.
Uh, and ran the computer club in high school. And on the weekends and in some evenings, I hung out with the burnouts because they had good pot.
You know, in high school, when I was playing Dungeons and Dragons, half of the people I was playing with were nerds and half of them were the burnouts. So I understand. I understand.
Yeah. For me, the game was Traveler.
Mm-hmm.
That came out in '77,
Mm-hmm.
which was the science fiction version of D&D. And that's when I wasn't hanging out with the burnouts in the weekends and evenings. The nerds were playing Traveler and other role playing games.
All right. All right. Well, I played a bit of Traveler when I was a young man myself. Matter of fact, I just recently gave away all my Little Black Book Traveler books. I'm kind of sad I
Oh
did it
yeah,
now, but yeah, but I gave it to a good home. It went to a good home. I still have my hardback copy of the GDW Traveler book, though, from back in those days, in case somebody ever wants to run an OG Traveler game for me. Fingers
yeah. I still have a
crossed.
few. I still have a few Traveler related things on my shelf. I've got some of the latest version stuff up here. And then if you look on the shelf here, I've got 2 issues of Challenge magazine.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Challenge 45 is the first place that paid me money to write words.
Ooh, it's always good to be paid money for words. I'm still trying to figure that one out myself.
Mm.
All right. So, what kind of things back when you used to you talk about Traveler? You talk about Traveler. So we know about Traveler. What other kind of nerdy things did you like back when you were a younger man?
Well, science fiction in general. When I was in 6th grade, my grandmother handed me a copy of The Star Beast by Robert Heinlein, which
Hmm.
is
Awesome book.
on the shelf
Yes.
Awesome.
behind me
Hmm.
now. It's not a good shape. Uh, and I remember when I took the book, I flipped through it, and the first thing I noticed was, "Oh, there's no pictures in here." And my grandma says, "Well, try it anyway. You might like it." And that story ignited in me a love of science fiction. And my grandmother, bless her, kept feeding me Heinlein novels. I didn't read a brand new Heinlein novel for like at least a decade because she would buy them and then she'd read them and then my mother would read them and then they would hand them to me.
So
Well,
you
at
got
least,
them like third hand.
and his family had good taste.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, that's cool. Yeah, it's always interesting to hear how people sort of got their start in their love of various fandoms. Some people it's I used to watch Star Trek with my dad, or
Mhm.
I remember going to this movie or that movie with mom the first time or what have you. It's always interesting because people have different stories about how they sort of got their start into that
Wild
down
and
that
wonderful world of geekdom. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm just going to keep blaming it on my grandmother because, you know, I still remember one summer, we didn't watch a lot of TV as
Mhm.
kids, so I really didn't know what was coming.
Uh-huh.
And my grandmother grabbed my brothers and I and says, "Come on, we're going to the movies." And she's the one who took us to go see Star Wars
Uh-huh.
in the theater.
Uh-huh.
So, I mean, yeah, there's still several books on my shelf that I got from my grandmother.
Yeah.
Well, the Heinlein Juveniles are amazing books.
Yeah.
And I really
Yeah.
feel sad for young people who are dismissing Robert Heinlein because of the very poor adaptation of Starship Troopers. If you read Have Spacesuit, Will Travel, you will be a Heinlein fan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, I read all of them, and then one of the books on my shelf is actually the Foundation trilogy by
Uh-huh.
Isaac Asimov, and that got me into a whole different realm of science fiction and following his stuff. Um, so yeah, it's books are how I started, and that's the nerdiest thing I did as a kid was books.
Now, you were in the Navy. Has your experience from the Navy influenced your writing? Because we know quite a few sci fi writers who are actually ex Navy men and women who bring their experience with them.
Well, being a submarine sailor, I have a knowledge of what people are like when they're in an enclosed container for a couple of months with
Mhm.
no real connection to the outside. And in my first book, there's an entire chapter that boils down to the relationships between the crewmates. In that the most junior officer has just qualified her first watch station, so the next junior officer begins a campaign of pranks, and they go back and forth pranking each other. And it's an enjoyable chapter. It's not terribly long, but what I will say is that every single prank I put in the book, I have personally seen done on board a U.S. submarine.
Uh, should we ask if you ever actually were the instigator of any of those pranks, or should we just leave that alone?
I would plead the fifth. Uh, the other
Understood.
thing
Now,
is that I spent a lot of time up in control during drills and different iterations, and I really soaked in what it feels like to be on the bridge when the command structure and how the orders are given and the cadence of how
Mhm.
orders happen. And so I built that into my crew, even though they're a much smaller crew. And the other thing is the flip side of that is the informality that grows when it's not important.
right.
You
Yeah.
know, you get that dichotomy where they're all kind of flippant and poking fun at each other. Emergency happens, boom, it's all straight and narrow and perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up because I've noticed that in certain movies that we've watched, particularly sci-fi movies. Um, I'm thinking about Alien. The
Hmm.
movie Alien. There was so much banter and giving each other a hard time, for a while, and then things got real, and then all of a sudden there was none of this levity. There was none of this, joking around. This was
Uh,
okay. We're in this together. We have to survive together. We got to have each other's backs, and
Hmm.
we know what we're supposed to be doing. We know how to do this, even though even though things didn't turn out exactly the way the characters would have wanted. That's kind of beside the point.
Well, no, that's the point of the story. Yeah.
But I mean, I hope you get what I was trying to
No,
convey there. That
absolutely, absolutely, and I
um,
agree. And there are
yeah,
cases like that have caught the flavor of what it's actually like to be in the military.
yeah, yeah. It's a matter of being under so much pressure, and doctors will do it too. Physicians or EMS workers. Anytime I
Mhm.
think that there is this tremendous pressure that you're under for a certain period of time, once that pressure valve, is open and the pressure is no longer there, it's like it's a release. It's a way to just cope with what you've just gone through. Um, I mean, I've been fortunate enough not to have been in any of those situations, but I've worked with police and I've known them when they've responded to certain things and how they handle things once they come back and once they come down, so to speak. So anyway,
Yeah.
that's kind of a side issue. I need to do my job and get myself back on track.
yeah. Yeah. You need to be in your own worry seat, is what you need.
I know. Um, well, going back into high school for a minute, I read, and you can forgive me if I read this about the wrong Dennis Myers. uh, I should point out here that we had this little discussion. There are two Dennis Myers that are both science fiction fantasy authors, and I made the mistake of trying to do some background work on the
Oh,
wrong Dennis Myers. So I have to sincerely apologize for that mistake. But we have the right Dennis Myers here, Dennis M. Myers here, and
of the mini Dennis
of the
Myers.
many Dennis Myers that are probably out there. I think that you were the one I read this about, where you were in high school and read a particularly awful bad book and decided I can do better, and so
Yes.
so you did. That's kind of how things started for you. Was that really sort of the turning point for you, or the point where you decided, you know, hey, I want to do this. I can do this, because I can do it better. Uh,
Well, I was first off, I was 17 years old. Like I did think kind of highly of myself at the time. But my mother handed me a book by an author who I will not name. But I started reading it, and it threw me out of the story because of the things that I considered to be totally stupid and unrealistic. And I sat there and I looked at it, and I looked at the price on the cup, and I just thought about this person got paid money to write this stuff. And I honestly just thought, I could do better than that. And by the time I was done with high school, I had already plotted out my first trilogy and I wrote the first page of my first book. And I gave it to my grandmother, and she read it, and she said, "It's good. Where's the second page?" And that was the first point. I wish I could go back and actually go write that second page, because, it would have changed things. But at the time, there were family issues and things going on. I got distracted. And at some point along the way, I found out how much authors actually make.
mm.
We talk about Robert Heinlein, and we like to think that he was rich and powerful, but he made his money writing Harlequin romance novels. He did not make the big money off of the science fiction. And when I understood that, that's when I really thought, okay, I will work to make as much money as I can so that I can afford to take the time off and write.
Mm-hmm.
And that didn't happen until 2017. At the time, I'm in my 50s, and I got laid off, but I got laid off with a severance that
Mm-hmm.
meant I didn't even have to look for a job for several months.
Mm-hmm.
And thanks to my lovely wife, who agreed that it would be a good idea for me to sit down and finish one of my many projects, that's when I sat down and started writing. And the first manuscript that I completed was later split in two. So that's my first two books, Final Assembly and Precipice. And going into it, I always knew it was going to be a trilogy. And I had the trilogy mapped out. Just my first trilogy is four books because I'm not very good at it yet.
Uh,
Well,
well,
it sounds like you're in the same company that Douglas Adams was in.
Yes. Yeah, well, not quite as high paid as he is. And some authors do get paid money.
uh, well, just shoot for the stars. Just make that your goal. Just keep moving on up, as they say. Uh,
Yep.
Don't make me sing the theme from the Jeffersons.
I'm
People heard enough of that at RavenCon.
I'm not making you sing. Period.
Okay,
No.
okay, good,
Oh,
good.
sorry. That's
Yeah.
all right, Spaceman. I think you get the
Take it
next
away.
one.
Take it away. Take it away. Dennis, being a naval man, how did you prepare yourself for a career as a writer? It seems like such a big change.
Ever since I got that first inkling I wanted to be a writer, I started writing down my ideas. Now, that first series, that was in a box that got left home when I joined the Navy, and it got tossed before I managed to get back to it. But my entire Navy career, I would I would write down story ideas. I would, an idea would come to me. I'd write it, and I kept all of these things, little pieces of paper, books. I had notes written in books and all of that. And eventually, a cousin of mine, who's also a writer, suggested that I take all of my story ideas and put them on one timeline. And
Hmm.
amazingly enough, most of my stories fit somewhere along on this timeline.
Mhm, mhm,
That was probably the biggest help in doing this. And then, like I said, I got laid off. When I did that, what I actually did was take a dozen different ideas that I had of projects I wanted to finish and put them into a database and then create a little random generator that pulled one out randomly. Uh, you'll enjoy this. I even put weighted numbers from 1 to 10, which ones I thought were more important. And it popped out this short story that I had started in 2006. And I looked it up on my timeline and found that I had slotted it in right near where the political entity called the Corporate Federation ended and the Automated Empire began. And I thought, ooh, well, this is my origin story for the Automated Empire. And that's how I tied it all together. So for me, the preparation has been going on for decades as I've thought through this world and this universe and what I want to do and what I want to say. Um, and primarily, what I want to say, when I want to explore, is what it means to be a human being.
A
So,
lot of
yeah.
sci-fi, you know, really kind of comes back around to that because whether it's fantasy adventure like Star Wars or morality plays like Star Trek, it all focuses on what does it really mean to be human.
Mhm. Yeah,
and
and
I
it
think
seems to have gone topical because just as I was being published, AI became a big thing, and I'm like, well, what do you think automates the automated empire?
Oh well, okay. How long did I'm sorry, I just all right. Dennis, how long did it take you to put that first novel together?
um, it probably took me 4 or 5 months to write the first draft of the manuscript, and then another 6 or 7 months to split it and finish the two books. They were done together. Um, yeah, so a year ish once I sat down and started writing. And each of the last two books took a lot less time because I knew where I was going.
Okay. Okay.
and it sounds like from what you were saying a minute ago that you pretty much already had this idea for not just a story or even a series, but you sort of created this whole universe um, that you were playing around in, so to speak. You
Hmm.
created this sort of vast, sandbox, if you will. That uh, and I guess with the idea of the sandbox, since you have created this, have you ever considered opening it up to anybody else to to write a story in?
Oh,
Or is this just
absolutely.
your baby and it's nobody else is going to touch it?
No, no. There are plenty of universes that belong to people who don't want others to play in them.
Mm,
I want to cast it wide open and find people who want to come and enjoy and have fun. It's the timeline that I have runs out at least 4,000 years. Yes, I'm adjusting it here and there, but there's so much out there that could be explored off the beaten path.
mm-hmm,
Um, just as an example, even for myself, I always knew after the first series, I knew about what the second series was going to look like. And one of the novels that is ready to go is Secret of the Ombax, and that is it takes place about 7 years after the first series, and it continues several of the major characters. Um, I'm looking forward to going with that. But in the course of writing the first series, one of the lines in the very first book is somebody is warning somebody else about the people on Luna, and he says, what they say is outside every airlock on Luna is a patch of red ice. And that leads to researching something called the Troubles and how Luna got to be a post scarcity society. It wasn't pretty. There were
Hmm.
some fights several
Yeah.
hundred years back. Well, that's what led to another book, the second of the three books that I've been working on. Red Ice is the name of the series, and the first book is Murder on a Monochrome World.
Oh,
Um,
I like that title.
That's a great title.
right, and then there's a character that's introduced in book two, and then you see her again in book three as a minor antagonist. Uh, I got this idea of a redemption arc. She's basically on the wrong side of the war. So she spent after this, she spends 5 years in prison. The new government has now decided that, maybe we can use her talents in a role that would be deniable, go do this
Hmm.
mission for us.
Right.
And if you get caught, you're on your own.
Right.
Um, and I've been playing with that. And the first book in that series is called Murdering Mariko. Her name is Mariko, so Murdering Mariko. And I already have titles for the other two books and ideas of where they're going to go. So those are the three series that I'm working on, two of which grew out of the work that I did.
Hmm.
So to think that I'm going to be able to hit every touchstone, every milestone in these 4,000 years, and keep in mind, I do have a trilogy called Fall of the Automated Empire that
Hmm.
takes place several thousand years later, the other side of the trip. Um, so, yeah, the idea of having people share that space, especially, and this is one thing, especially if somebody is out there who wants to write in a post apocalyptic Earth military sci-fi going up against automation and bots. Let me know. I got the scenery. I would love to have people write in that space.
Hmm. Wow, that sounds really cool. That's
It does.
great.
It does.
And good for you to to just open that up to to other contributors, and
Hmm.
I'm sure that there would be people out there interested. And right now they're probably thinking, "Ooh, I've got an idea," and so maybe somebody will hit you up. Because we'll get contact information for you.
Yeah. Well,
So
yeah, we'll make sure that Dennis's contact information is in the show notes.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Um, well, so you really kind of already, um, you already had said that you sort of had it planned out that this was not going to be just a single book or even a single series. It was just going to become this vast, universe. Um, and given how expansive it is, can you think of one particular character in any one of your books that you would most identify with?
Right now, with the first series, there are three characters that I identify with the most. I don't know that I could pick one. And the protagonist of the first book, Dawn, um, I identify with her on a heart level, being a good person, doing the best you can, loving the people around you. I feel that. So there's an emotional core there that is a lot of me. In the second book,
Mm-hmm.
there are two military characters. There's the Marine, Ted Becker, and then there's the Navy guy. He's the weapons officer aboard the ship, the hero ship, named Jake Torrey. And Jake and Ted are more the action adventure kind of guys that I enjoy. I, I guess Jake, though, Jake would probably be the one whose life I would love to live, especially in the second book, because it's all about him falling in love and growing closer with his new girlfriend, and meeting her dad, who happens to be a grumpy old Navy guy, and watching them interact. That was so much fun to write.
Yeah. Uh,
It sounds fun.
well, I I stole your question, so you can still steal mine.
uh, so the question I'm stealing is, what do you mainly draw your inspiration from as a writer?
Um, for me, it's the people in my life, characters, and some from media and other sources, but mostly a lot of these characters, their heart and soul comes from people that I know or grew up with. As an example, Dawn, again, my main character, she's based on my best friend in high school, who was a woman,
Hmm.
my best friend of all time, who is a woman who lives down in Virginia Beach, and a girlfriend that I had when I was in Charleston, South Carolina. And these three have the same kind of sense of humor, snarky and can do it attitude, and just that whole thing. So I tried to model her after these three, and I did that throughout. That it's all people I know, or um, how I imagine people to be. And of course, for my stories, as much as goes on left and right, it's about the people. You know, how people interact, what people do in a tough spot.
Do you ever find yourself, um, you know, people watching, and then draw inspiration from, from seeing people just randomly, observing people interacting with each other, I like you're sitting in a restaurant or something, and you look across the restaurant, and you see a couple, and they're obviously engaged in some sort of argument or something, and she looks like she's not happy, and maybe you think in your mind, maybe he's just told her that it's over, or something like that, or maybe he's just owned up to a mistress or something like that. You ever come up with anything like that?
I have always been a people watcher.
Uh-huh.
When I was in the Navy in my off hours, if I wasn't playing Traveler with the buddies, we would go to the mall and just sit and watch people, you know?
Mhm.
And I'm one of these people, I look at somebody else and I try to imagine this person that you see just for a fleeting moment. They have an entire life that you'll never know about. They have people who love them. They have, parents. They live in a home. There are so many things going on in their lives, and it's everywhere. Like this whole vast network of people out there, and sometimes it just fascinates me. You know.
Yeah, I get it. I'm a people watcher.
I'm not. I don't. I don't watch people.
Yeah.
I'm not like a creepy,
Yeah, you're a creeper.
creepy
You're a creeper,
stalker
halfling.
or
It's
anything.
stalker happy.
I just
Hmm.
it's I don't know. It's the what do you call it, the wannabe psychologist in me. I think about what people's motives are when they're interacting with other people. I think about what their motivations are, what's driving them.
Mhm.
Um, but that's just me. I'm a frustrated psychologist, I guess. Frustrated because I actually didn't become a psychologist, but that's another point.
You're
Uh,
something better. You're the co-host of a podcast.
Woo! Yes, yay!
With all those big podcast bugs we keep talking
That's
about.
right. I know. Hey, they're gonna come one of these
One of these
days.
days. One
You
of these
know,
days.
one of these days.
Oh.
Uh,
All right, Dennis, let's switch gears for a minute. You've recently started designing your own t-shirts. Tell us about that.
Well, I mentioned before I got laid off in 2017. I've been laid off 3 times since then.
oh
It
gosh.
hasn't been easy.
Oh dear.
And one of the things that I stumbled on is somebody on YouTube saying you can make T-shirt designs and make lots and lots of money.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I figured out how to do it, and I made. I've got over 600 different designs. A large number of them are for people who love books or people who are writing. They're motivational, positive thoughts. From there, I branched into more inspirational, general
Mm-hmm.
things like about kindness and um, heart and love and things like that. I've done a few political ones, but they're in their own category.
Mm.
And a lot of just general ideas and designs and beautiful things. I did a whole series with like birds and butterflies against a moon backdrop uh, without words that
Uh-huh.
are really nice. And so right now, that business is paying for itself. It would be nice if a little bit would come my way.
Yeah.
And along those lines, I put in a discount code. It's halfling, um, and if you use the or no spaceling, sorry, I
Space.
cut the two together, spaceling. And if you put in spaceling as the discount code on the site, you get $2 off everything on my site at shop.automatedempire.com.
Oh wow, we'll definitely get that out there for people for sure.
Awesome.
That's awesome. Well, we appreciate that. We appreciate that. I think I'm gonna have to go shopping now.
Shopping. Not right before LibertyCon, you're not. Maybe afterwards when we get back if we
Yeah.
have any money.
Yeah. Well,
Oh,
that's really cool, and I hope that everybody out there will take full advantage of that. So that's really cool. Well, okay. So getting back to I guess this applies to both your writing career and your new T-shirt business. What's been the biggest surprise for you?
Um, I think in my writing,
Hmm.
the biggest surprise for me was the first time a character took over the story. It was years ago. I was working on a fantasy novel about zombies, and I had my main zombie character and the little girl zombie, and then the human main character, and they were going to go to a wedding. It was a little bit of a silly story, but they were going to go to a wedding, and they're gathered around the fire, explaining what they're going to do. And one of the side characters was this old zombie who had one arm and no legs, and he's smartass. He is, you know, just making fun of them and laughing at them, and eventually he declares he's going to go with them because he's got to see how they die. So he
oh,
goes and what's happened is he didn't lose his legs and arms. He's lent them out to other people who need them more than he does. So he gets them back and he joins them on the way. And I swear he's got the best lines of the entire story. But for me, that was the first time where as I was writing the character changed the story and improved it.
Uh-huh.
And I love when that happens. I absolutely enjoy getting into that state of having the characters interact and it just works.
So this is basically a sort of a humor book, a humor story,
No, it
or
was just a funny part of a more serious story.
oh, okay,
Um, and it's not complete. It's something I started writing in the Navy just before I started going through a divorce.
okay,
Life
okay,
distracted me.
yeah, yeah,
It has this strange way of doing that, doesn't it, Janet?
yeah. It does.
Yes.
Uh, yeah, because I was all ready to pick that up. So you'll have to let me know. You have to let me know when it finishes. You know, when you get it
It
finished.
is on my list of things to finish, yes.
Yes, we'll have to feature that on the Halflings Book Nook.
Yeah, I can do that. Um, which will be coming hopefully in September. So, uh, but okay, so that's been the biggest surprise for you. But what is the best piece of advice that you have ever gotten?
For a new writer, um, the best piece of advice I've ever got, and I give this advice as well. Um, you when you're trying to figure out how to accomplish writing a novel, you can't just lift it from somebody else and use it because everybody is unique, everybody is different, and what works well for one person might drive you insane. For example, the whole debate between plotter and pantser, and most people are somewhere along that spectrum. I have
Mm-hmm.
a friend, Christopher Rocchio, who wrote the Sun Eater series. It's up here on my shelf. When he sits down to write a novel, he starts with a detailed outline. He'll do a 30,000 word outline. I can't do that. I tried it once, and when I was done with that kind of a detailed outline, I had no interest in writing the story because the discovery aspect is what I thrive on. So I learned that about myself.
Mm-hmm.
The best thing you can do is find out how other authors do things as if they're offering you tools. Everybody's got a tool set here, tool there. Find the tools that work for you. Uh, for example, in my case, I use spreadsheets to keep track of the book's timeline for all the chapters, and I keep track of characters and character names, and any notes I put in a spreadsheet. And then I use Google Docs for my writing, and those tools work well for me. But there are other tools like Scrivener, uh, World Anvil, or just a variety of different tools that might work better for you. Try everything, find what works, and then get that first novel written. We're
Mm-hmm.
waiting for you.
And that's what somebody else, uh, kind of in a nutshell, gave to you as advice.
Yeah, that's the advice I've been hearing for a while now. And
Uh-huh.
I started going to local conventions and meeting authors and talking to them and getting advice. And consistently, that has been some of the best advice and some of the first advice that I got is just find the way that you get it done.
Do you are you part of any writers groups?
Not a group per se. I have kind of my posse that I hang with
Mm-hmm.
that varies somewhat. Patrick Dugan, um, Darren Kennedy, Stuart Jaffe, John Hartness, and I'm going to start forgetting people here, but there are authors in this group up and down the East Coast.
Mm-hmm.
They When I said I wanted to be a writer and I was there to learn how to write,
Mm-hmm.
they immediately adopted me, took me under their shoulders, and brought me into the group before I had even finished the first novel, before I was even shopping it out. They were accepting me as one of them,
Yeah.
and that was priceless.
You're running with the good crew,
Priceless.
my friend. You're running with the good
Yeah.
crew.
We know all those
It
guys.
feels like
Uh,
it.
so yeah. So that's great. even if it's not like a writers group per se, where you sit around and read each other's stories and critique each other's stories, or maybe you do. I don't know, but do
I
you
don't.
guys, any of you guys do that with each other?
No, haven't really done that yet. I don't know. For me, I tend to have the story and crank the story out, and then I want to go straight to editing. I
Hmm.
want to get an editor in there and help hammer it into shape and fix the things that I've messed up.
I understand completely. I understand. Dennis, talking about the craft of writing, what do you think makes a good story?
You have to have characters that people like. It doesn't matter if they're the good guy, the bad guy, or some, nefarious gray something. You have to care about the character enough to keep following the story. And if you can do that, if you can make characters that people care about, you can craft the story around that. Uh, yeah, that in my opinion, though, I could be wrong.
Well, I think everybody has their own opinions about what they think makes a good story.
Well, and Dennis has written an infinite number of more books than I have, since I haven't written any.
uh, yeah. Um, so he's got the voice of experience.
That's right. That's right.
But um, you know, as an avid reader, I I can say with certainty that I like what I like. And then, and other people, I may recommend a book to somebody, and because I really enjoyed it, and then that person will start to read it, and they'll be like, "What was she thinking?" I can't get into
Mm.
this, and it's purely subjective. I mean, some people will answer that that the plot is the most important element of a good book. Some people will say that it's the character interactions. Some people will say, is it a well described and immersive setting? I mean, everybody's got their own, you know, particular things that interest them in a book that they're reading. And I mean, there's very few books that I have just sat down and said, no, I can't finish this. Get into it, maybe read a chapter and say, I'm not going to waste my time on this. Very few books I do that too. I can usually find something good about the things that I'm reading.
Hmm.
So, um, but like you, just my opinion. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's another thing that I would tell new authors is write the book you want to read. Don't worry about if somebody else wants to read your book. Write the book you want to read. Because I promise you, you will find people who enjoy your work if you do. So,
we have had other authors on the show say exactly the same thing. That write the book that you would want to read. Because if you want to read it, then there'll be others that will want to read it. You just you may have to go out and find them, but they'll be out there, right?
yeah.
Absolutely.
uh, well, talking about your career in writing and now your newest career as a t-shirt designer, if you couldn't do something creative as a career, if you had your choice of other career opportunities, if the career of creativity was not open to you, what would you do? What would you be? What career would you choose?
I would probably just stay as a software developer. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it is somewhat creative in itself, and it's pays well when you have it. Um, I don't know if I'm going to be able to stay a software developer. It's been a little while now,
Mm-hmm.
um, But yeah, it's always been a good career for me. And I'm kind of hoping to stay in the career for a few more years
Mhm.
as it is.
Okay, fair enough.
Now we're getting to the nitty gritty of the episode. One of the things we ask authors is to give us the elevator pitch for either your most recent book or your upcoming book. Imagine we're coming to you at a convention and you're trying to get that sale. What would you tell us?
I have three books in the works. I'm going to be taking them to Indiegogo soon to get editing, book covers, and polishing to get them ready to publish.
Mhm.
The first book is Secret of the Ombax. This is a first contact story that goes horribly wrong. The seeds are planted in my first series, but this is standalone. It's going to lead to its own series. The second book is called Murdering Mariko, and it is a redemption story of a woman who goes to prison for her actions taken during a war when people died who shouldn't have. And she gets to become basically a secret agent and go work for the government that has imprisoned her. And then the final book is a prequel series, takes place 800 years before my first series, and it is the struggle between the corporations that have destroyed what was left of the government around Luna, and they are trying to automate everything, but the rich people don't want to share their wealth, so they have to get rid of their employees, the workers, and without a government, without oversight, their methods are becoming more and more violent and deadly. The hero of that story is a police officer who investigates a murder. That's Murder on a Monochrome World.
And we'll all be on the lookout for those. So when is the Indiegogo going to launch?
I am about 80 to 90% done with Murdering Marco. That is the last of the three manuscripts. Once that is to a state where I believe it's complete, then I'm ready for editing, and that's where I'm going to need the funding to get that done. So a few weeks, I think, a few weeks, and that'll go live. I just want to
Good.
wait until I'm done with that last manuscript.
And that ties into with our next question. Where can people find out more about you and your projects?
I have a central website called automatedempire.com. All of my links are there. And if you want to have a more lively conversation, I've recently started a Discord server. And there's an invite link on the website. And I think I sent one to you guys.
Yep.
Um, Daily interaction and conversations are going on there. I also have a monthly newsletter. And you can find me on Facebook. I do a lot of talking on Facebook. Um, it might get a little bit too political for some people. Sorry. But the Discord server, no politics there. It's all about story and crafting and what's coming up.
Mhm. Now, what about the T-shirts? Is that
That's shop.automatedempire.com. You'll also find a link for that on automatedempire.com.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool. Very good.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, that is
And
great. We will make sure we get all that in the show notes because we definitely want people to reach out and support you. In fact, we hope people have been reaching out to all the different creators that we've had on the show over over the almost 3 years we've been doing this. Because
oh,
that's one of
I should throw out there, I also
yeah.
have recently started a Patreon and
Okay,
almost immediately got my first supporter on Patreon. So,
nice. Very good. Very good. Um, yeah. So guys, keep that in mind as well. But yeah, that's one of the reasons why we do what we do is that we not only enjoy talking to creators,
Which we do
which
immensely.
we do immensely, but we also want them all to succeed, and so whatever little part we can do to help to help them, that makes it worthwhile. So So again, we'll get all of that in the show notes for you, and hope that people will follow up on that. And we want to thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. It has been a wonderful conversation, and getting the chance to talk to you. Um, we just saw you at Con Carolina, so that was great. Hopefully, we're going to run into you again before too long at another convention. We're going to Liberty Con this weekend, and then our next one is
Congregate in Winston-Salem.
yeah,
I will be at Congregate.
nice.
Congregate, Con Carolinas, and RavenCon are the three that you're going to find me there.
Yeah,
Mysticon is coming back. I haven't made final arrangements,
yes,
but I intend to go back to Mysticon.
yes,
We do too.
yes.
I have been to MarsCon, but I don't know that I can do two in the same month.
Uh-huh.
I would rather do Mysticon because that's the first convention that I went to on this journey was Mysticon.
They they do a heck of a convention. They really do. And we have always enjoyed going to Mysticon.
Yeah, Carla does it right.
Yeah, yeah. And it's always been our favorite con, really, to be honest with you. And we were so sad when it left. But now it's back, yay! Uh, so that's great. But yeah, we'll see you at Congregate for sure. But again, we just want to thank you so much for taking the time to join us. It's been wonderful to catch up with you and hear about your journey into becoming the very prolific writer that you have become, and the t-shirt designer, 600 designs. Wow, I mean that's impressive.
That is impressive.
Yes.
So
There's also a handful of coffee cups and mugs and other things, but
of course there is. that's that's great. That is wonderful. We wish you all the success in the world. We really do.
All right, and
thank
we
you
want
and thank you for having me.
All right, and we want to thank our listeners for tuning in today, and we hope that if you've enjoyed and perhaps become inspired by today's guest, Dennis Myers. We want
Dennis
to,
M. Myers.
yes, Dennis
Dennis
M.
M.
Myers.
Myers.
Yeah, Dennis M. Myers.
Right.
And we want to give everyone a huge thank you again for joining us. And this is the Spaceman for the Halfling and the Spaceman podcast. Over and out.